Hey, welcome to a very special episode of Lab the Podcast. I am honored to be here with my friend and renowned poet, Paul Pastor, to celebrate the release of the Locust Years, his latest collection of poems. Paul is a poet, writer, and editor from Oregon. His work uncovers the inner life of the world as it experienced in nature, literature, and the rich traditions of historic Christian spirituality. Paul is the author of several books, including Bower Lodge Poems, a kid's book about God, the Listening Day series, and The Face of the Deep. His work has been widely published in many fine outlets, including Books and Culture, the Los Angeles Review of Books, The Windover, Christianity Today, Fathom, Ecstasis, and I could go on and on. Paul serves HarperCollins as executive editor for Nelson Books, and he's lived for years up in one of the most beautiful parts of the world, the Columbia Gorge up in Oregon, where he wanders the woods with his wife, Emily, a classically trained fine artist, and their 3 children. Paul, thank you for being here and congratulations on this incredible collection.
Zach, thank you so much. So excited to have this book out in the world.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I mean, we were just talking before we jumped on and started recording that it feels different. We'll get into maybe why that's the case,
Mm,
but we've been friends for a while now and enjoyed really celebrating several good projects, beautiful things on a lot of different fronts. But this one does have a special weight to it that I felt. How are
mm,
you feeling as this comes out? I mean, you've done this so many times, publishing, releasing books, so I think everyone probably feels different. But what are you noticing about this one that you're feeling that
mm.
might be different?
What a kind question. Yeah, releasing each book into the world feels different. It's like, by the time you finish the writing and you finish the publishing process, I mean, you know this, uh, by the time a book comes out, you're a solid year past the end of finishing it, roughly, right? So I've worked on this for about the past 4 years. It's been a significant area of focus. I've put a lot of thought into it, time into it, care into it, love into it. And so, right where it's new for everybody else, you sort of get to see it afresh. You see this thing that you've worked on for all this time through the eyes of other people. And that's part of the joy of it because, as you release a book, um, there's release in the sense of now it's published, and there's also the release in the sense of letting it go. This is now no longer just a possibility. It's no longer something living in your head or in your notebook, but it's a real thing in the world that has a separate life from you. So the greatest joy or how it feels different is seeing how many people are deeply emotionally connecting with it in a new way. I think my voice and my skill have improved. They're well tuned in this book. The book's structured very intentionally. It's crafted very intentionally. There's a beautiful art element to it. So I just feel really proud. I feel like in a very humble way, I feel very proud of what I'm offering to people here. And it's just such a joy to see what they are noticing, what they are calling out, what they are emotionally connecting with and getting excited about. Uh, and it just feels in the best way like a release. I get to let this
Yeah.
go now and let you all run with it.
Yeah. No, that's well said. That idea of you're like there's multiple layers of a release going
Mm,
on and emotions that come at each unfolding of that for sure.
mm,
And we don't know yet, right? Like the reviews, the people who are remarking on this and noticing,
mm,
obviously, there's all of us who enjoy poetry and
mm,
are deeply moved by your work. And then there's other poets, people we respect, Malcolm Guite being one of them,
mm,
that is
mhm,
celebrating this work.
mhm,
And so you start noticing, like, okay, I may not know from a Guite perspective why this is resonating so deeply, but I
mm,
feel it. And then he
mm,
gives language to that same feeling and saying, yeah, there's something special about this. And you touched on it, and we'll get to it, but the visual art is beautiful.
mm,
The way that you've curated is beautiful. The seasonal nature of it is beautiful. The even the emotional tone of it is beautiful. So I think it is like these little aligning tributaries that are all kind of moving together in a way,
mm,
and it's different. I think it's different. So before we get into the book, go to the Columbia River for people who are down here
mm,
or in other parts of the
mhm.
country. that don't know the Columbia River Gorge, I said like it's one of the most magical places, most beautiful places. You
Mm.
say that you wander the woods up there.
Yeah,
as
it's true.
as you wander the woods, what's something particularly magical about the woods
Mm,
that you love? I love the smell of a forest in the
mhm,
Northwest. Like the that
mhm,
forest smell is just there's nothing like it. But what is it for you that's so enchanting about that Northwest forest?
mm. What a great question. I mean, the density of life, of sheer life, is just wild. Even more than the Amazon rainforest, the woods where we are right now. Like as I'm looking out my window right now, I just see wall of green. It's a wall of green. There's more biodensity here, more sheer life per acre than any other place on the planet. So that smell that you remember, that's the lungs of the earth breathing oxygen out into the environment. So I just love that. But what I love most about the place I live, and it's by no means exclusive to here, it's actually found everywhere, is a sense of true wildness. Um, wildness and wilderness aren't always the same, but wildness is that sense of something being allowed to follow its own nature, right? Without the imposition of human will upon it. We're not potting the plant, we're not mowing the grass. It's allowed to follow its nature. And where we are here, partly just because it's, a bit out of the way and protected, you get to see a forest be what a forest really wants to be.
Mm,
You get to see the creatures of that forest be what they want to be. And that calls to a certain wildness, I think, in the human spirit that likewise wants to become something. It wants to grow in a particular way.
mm,
So that's very much the theme of the book as well. I'm bumping into that over and over again, these ideas of nature, the idea of, what is a spirit? How does life clarify us? How does it purify us? How does it make us more of who we really are? Those processes are beautiful. They're also often very painful. That's part of what I love about my place is it's wild, and that calls
mm.
out a certain wildness in my own soul.
Yeah. You feel that in your writing. I think that might be again why you can't maybe we can't fake these things. Like you are who you are, right? Like your nature, your nurture, your story, all of the things that have gone into you becoming who you are, and then you're nested within a particular ecosystem, and that's informing your writing because it's deeply. I mean, you're philosophically, theologically, you're one of the sharpest people that I know. Just deeply, deeply insightful. So your head space is really rich, but this is an aching kind of collection. Like there's hurt, and sadness
Mm,
in this collection.
mm,
And you have that, but there is that nature connection
mm,
that kind of does allow you to exhale and to encounter those big ideas and heavy emotions, but from a really gentle place. I think that's what's so cool about walking in the woods, right? You're surrounded by these
mm.
things that are dangerous, they're bigger than you, they're mysterious, but you do feel a sense of like belonging and safety there too. It's a beautiful thing. So that's my
Mm.
commercial to go to the Columbia Gorge and
Come on out and walk
visit
around,
Paul. Yeah.
breathe some air.
All right.
Mm,
The Locust Years.
mm,
This is the worst question probably that a writer can be asked. So I'll start with this one. But like, who do you hope picks this up? Right.
mm,
And I mean, that's an obvious like question that I'm sure every editor and marketing, every side of publishing says, who's it for? Who's it for?
mhm,
I mean, more like from Paul,
mm,
when you're imagining somebody who might need it, right?
mm.
And
Yeah,
who might like hold it against their chest and go, thank God.
yeah, yeah. What a great question. Well, the I want the person to pick this up who feels like hope is actually kind of a joke or that hope is foolish. Um, I write in the kind of the opening letter to the book about this story from the Gospels where Christ is called by a teacher of Israel, this really, well-known, well-respected community leader to go to the house of his daughter who's sick. And Jesus gets there late because he's helping somebody along the way, and the girl has died of her sickness. And Jesus says something that must have just been so ridiculous to the people there in the room. He says, basically, don't worry, like the girl's not actually dead, she's just sleeping. And the line from the gospel is, and they laughed at him.
Mm,
And they laughed at him. Because of course she's not sleeping. Of course she's dead. They know the difference between death and sleep. And now this guy comes walking in, having missed all of the lead up and all of the suspense and all of the, you know, feelings that attend a deathbed or the deathbed of a child. And now he's saying she's asleep. Like, of course they laugh. And yet, of course, we know how that story ends. Like
mm,
that hope, which was totally rationally foolish. Actually, there was something else going on. So the title of the book, The Locust Years, comes from a really similar promise in the Old Testament prophets, where God says, after this swarm of locusts have come and like basically eaten the year's food, they've destroyed the crop for the year. And in an agricultural society, this was a disaster of the first order. Um, and God says basically, like, hey, I'm going to restore to you the years that the locust has eaten. Like
mm,
all of that, all of those things that were just gone, taken, eaten, I'm going to give those back to you. And so when we think about loss in our lives, or we think about grief, or we think about something coming and doing the unfixable, devastating thing in our lives, it's easier not to hope for that restoration or that healing or that resurrection. It's actually a very rational thing to laugh at the idea that that could come back. And in my own life, as I've struggled with some pretty significant areas of just unfixable grief, things that just aren't going to go away, they're here. They're part of my story. They're part of my family's story. They're just here. I've had to struggle through that same feeling. Is it like, do I laugh when I hear the idea that God would actually like to save and heal and restore?
mm,
That laughter is the most rational thing in the world. Of course, there's
mm,
no logical sense in which certain things can be given back to us. And yet, Jesus takes the young girl by the hand and raises her up. And yet, God finds a way to do the impossible and restore to his people the years that the locusts have eaten.
mm,
So when you ask who should have this book and hold it against their chest, I really want the person who is tempted to that kind of laughter because their experience of life has been painful. Their experience of life has been devastating, and they've been strong through it. Honestly, they've been strong. Like they've risen to that occasion, but they don't actually feel like hope is for them. They don't actually feel like continued life and restoration and freshness is for them.
mm.
So poetry for me has been a solace. It's been certainly an expression of some of that feeling, but it's also been a delightfully foolish way of encountering that sacredly foolish promise. And it's the beating heart at the core of this collection.
As you describe that person who doesn't think hope is for them,
Mm. Mhm.
knowing the time period that you wrote this book, right? 2020, I think, to 2024,
Mhm.
the landscape of the world,
Mm.
I think, people came out of compounding grief, right?
Mm.
Like there was
Mhm.
immediate grief and fear in the world in 2020, and like
Mm.
just the cavitation that was going on, and suspicions and new questions, new fears, all that. And then the economic stuff like took a while to catch up. And so you had economic pressures that mounted, you had death
Mm.
of family and loss of
Mhm.
jobs, loss of life, loss of hope, all these things. And it was like a compound grief that just
Mm.
kept stacking.
Mm.
And that's why I think you said, this process has been 4 years in the making, 2 years, you get done with the book and then it's a year before it comes back out. I think that all of us are ready for
Mm.
that. I think there's a lot of us who maybe even say like, oh, well, no, I believe hope is for me at a
Mm.
head level, but
Mhm.
quietly, I don't know if I know anymore. Right.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
think more and more of us are gathering in that space
Mm.
where we don't want to give up on hope, but we're almost ready to. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you're writing like right on time for so many of us who are feeling something, maybe again, that we don't have words for. We were all going through that. You say that you were as well, right? That this was one of the most difficult personal periods of your life. So these were not just things you were looking at. You were literally walking around looking up through these canyons and
Yeah.
traveling. Yeah. As you wrote, were you aware that you were writing from a space where you were navigating that terrain, or did it take you a while and then you started to look back and go, oh wow, there's a collection here and there's some things
Mm.
that I've traveled I need to write about?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, yeah, I think I was aware in the sense that, as aware as anybody can be when you're walking through some tough stuff. Like, um, a lot of our family story has just been having to deal with chronic and unfixable illness and pain, like really, really deep pain in our immediate family. And that sort of chronic long-term suffering and the stress that like spans out from that and the questions and like just everything um has a very enervating quality to it, at least like at the beginning. Like it sort of wakes you up, like you awake in a slightly different way to your own life and to the realities of the world. So yeah, I was aware that um you're saying looking up the canyons of the grief. Yeah, you'd get a peek once in a while at like the larger story or how something would belong in your story. That totally makes sense. But there wasn't really any intention in those early days of like doing anything with that. It more came, in the past year or so, realizing there's actually a storyline here. There's actually um, not just a collection of odds and ends, but a through line. You start to see those pieces coming together for you. You start to sense a change in your own soul, in your own disposition of your life. And at that point, I was beginning to feel like, it's time to share some of this. It's time to offer this as a gift to other people so that, my words or my thoughts could be distilled somehow and offered. Maybe like a little sip of good whiskey to other people who are also on this road.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And you've always been really attentive to the visual elements in your
Hmm.
writing and in your books. You've always paid really keen attention to that. This artwork is again, it's rich in its own way. At what point in
Mm,
the process of collecting these poems did you start
mm.
to have an imagination for a picture that started to appear? Was it early on or was it late in the process? And then obviously I want to know, how did you
Yeah.
develop that?
Yeah, it was pretty late in the process. Yeah, it was pretty late. So Michael Cook, who did the illustrations, is an incredible British neo-romantic artist. One of my very, very favorite artists. There's a soulful quality and a symbolic quality to his work that really calls up a lot of the influences that are present in the poetry. So Malcolm Guite, of course, has been very kind to compare my poetry to the best of William Blake, he says, which is surely not true, but it's very kind. And Michael Cook is very much in that tradition of Blake. There's just if you look at it, it'll echo kind of the lithographs of William Blake and the remarkable art that's there, which has an inherent soulfulness, but also this inherent kind of earthiness to it. This is not an ethereal, floaty, abstract thing. Like these are bodies and they're heavy and they're interacting with one another. And it's very joyful and it's very kind of strange. It's how life looks to me. So about the time I was finishing the collection, and by finishing, I mean pulling together everything that was going to be in there and giving it its shape, giving it its through line, giving it its like story. I reached out to Michael. I was like, "Hey, do you want to collaborate?" And he, we had had some creative conversations beginning already, and he very generously said that he did. So quickly, a world emerged. I sent him quite a few. He lives in England, of course. I sent him quite a few reference images of my area and my place here, and we just sort of integrated that into a world of the book, into a world where. It's me, but it's not me. It's my place, but it's not my place, hopefully in a way that the reader can feel very welcomed and at home as they explore the themes and the remarkable art that's here. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. I love the way you describe that, like of embodied and strange, but familiar and joyful. Like it is when you get a copy of the book, and we'll talk about how to get the book. I want everybody to get it in a couple reasons. I mean, deeper than a couple, but one is I don't think Malcolm Guite's wrong. And I mean, I would probably be careful if I thought he was saying it, but
Yeah.
I,
Don't
but
listen,
I
Malcolm.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think he's right. And I mean, you're the most humble guy, so you're not gonna. This is strange, probably, but I read a lot,
Mm,
and you know the power of words, the sacredness of words. Like people who spend a lot of time around great writers and great words, and people who have there's depth, real like interior depth to the way they write. There's a sense and there's a collection of people. There's a lot of us who write, and then there's a group of people who are writing in this other kind of octave almost. And
mm,
you are one of those people. And for everybody listening, just know this, like whether it's Listening Day or Bower Lodge or the other things that Paul has written, Paul Pastor you are one of those
mm,
writers. And I'm so glad for it, for our moment, right? We can't always look back. And I love reading the great poets, right? Saturating our lives in that. Yes, all for that. And that work
mm,
is still going on. And that's what's happening. That's why I love this book so much and this
mm,
collection so much, because you
mm,
are, when you get this book, you're going to be buying art, right? The visual art is art.
mm,
It's thoughtful. It's chosen for a
mm,
reason. It's inviting you to see through something in a way. Every word is curated like that. This is the best of art. So
mm.
well done. Take
No,
Guy. He's
keep
not
talking,
wrong,
Zach. Keep
right?
talking. This is great.
He's not
Thank you.
wrong.
You're unbelievably kind. Yeah, unbelievably
You
kind.
you say that these large difficulties have a sort
Mm,
of seasonal effect. And that's how you structured the book in
mm,
seasons.
mhm,
When did that start to form, right? You had the collection emerged and you found that through line and you got the visual art, and then they're organized seasonally. And you say it's those large difficulties, those deep
mhm,
hurts seem to have
mhm,
a seasonal effect. They make their own
mhm,
weather.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Say more just
Mm.
about how you decided to move us through these in season.
Yeah, for sure. I think seasonally, I think, in terms of the rhythms of the year, that's sort of like calendars are strange to me. Seasons make a ton of sense. But I think specifically for this book, that first popped out when I wrote a poem. It's actually the second poem in the collection called very long, very long title, Regarding Spring, which sharpens grief by means of fresh, unconquerable joys.
Mm.
And that title, like it just sprung into my head almost before the poem was even complete. It was just like, yeah, this is about spring. And it's about how being in spring almost makes you sad by contrast, right? Like if you're carrying something with you, like you walk into the freshness and this new life of the world, and there's something that happens in your heart as a result of that. And then once that locked in, I just started to see all of the poems as falling into some element of seasonality, right? Spring is the return of new life. Summer is the growing of that life. Autumn is a falling asleep, but it's also harvest, and there's a certain joy there. And then winter is the depth of rest itself. It's cold, it's frigid in many ways. We might feel that it's sad, but it's also where we're gathering with other people, right? And we're coming together. So yeah, I think honestly, the seasonal aspect started with the writing of that particular poem, and I just began to everywhere, see it everywhere in this particular group of poems.
Yeah. I'm Zach Elliott, Executive Director of UVIBO, and together with our partners, we are recovering the deep Christian tradition of standing behind the arts by making significant investment in visual art, music, and literature. We're working together with some of the world's most gifted fine artists, composers, and authors to wondrously reveal Christianity and invite people to know God personally. This work to recover the tradition of standing behind the arts is going to take a fresh generation of patrons committed committed to resourcing and releasing these great artists to use the highest and best of their gifts to the glory of God and for the good of the world. You can join us in that work by becoming a V3 partner. Reach out for more information or go to vuvivo.com/support to join us in standing behind the arts. Well, I think it's helpful. I'm really grateful again for the visual art, for that seasonal kind of arc through it. I think it does make more sense, right, in our bodies than calendars do. And so I think every time we are invited to experience something that allows us to think and experience life seasonally, that's just good for us. And I think that helps almost set poetry up for its best, right? Because it positions us to be in a posture of winter or a posture of fall. And so something really beautiful happens through that. And I think that as you traveled this 4-year arc, right, it makes its own weather. These large things, they aren't just like, well, I read a poem and that, categorized and helped me have language for the entirety of this experience. No, this was like there's a journey that you invite us to go on that has some spring and has some fall and has some winter, right?
Yeah.
For you, right now, and I'll give you a little bit of lead time because we didn't talk about this before, but I want to almost ask you to pick a poem if you're willing to read
Please.
one. I have like a stack of the ones that I love that I could ask you to read, but maybe there's one in particular that you want to share as people begin to just kind of draw towards this book. I would love to invite you to read a poem, but as you're thinking about that, you say that, again, to hope is to risk disappointment. So going back to that person who doesn't think hope is for them, say more about that. When you said that, to hope is to risk disappointment.
Yeah. Well, it's the nature of faith.
Yeah,
right?
Go ahead.
It's the nature of faith. Like faith of any kind, even the most basic faith in another person is a form of hope. It's saying, hey, like I'm hoping that you're not going to let me down. And it takes courage and it takes bravery to actually exercise that in an honest way. The alternatives are cynicism. The alternatives are despair. The alternatives are disconnection. The alternatives are feeling like we've seen the world and we've looked into the face of God, and actually it's not all that, right? And then to remain childlike, to remain hopeful, to remain fresh-faced is to risk disappointment, and if the hope is big enough, to risk despair. It just is. But that's the basic movement that God invites us into. Faith is the basic movement. Like, do you trust that this is going to be the case, even when you can't see it, even when it makes no sense, even when, the girl is dead and it makes more sense to laugh than to believe. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. No, it's good. There's an aliveness that came up in me as I read every single part of this collection. I have this yearning for us to be really alive, and to risk being alive means to risk being disappointed. It means to love is to allow for the reality of loss. Like we can't sanitize our way to a safe existence that doesn't have these darker shadow tones to it. Like if you want to live, if you want to breathe, if you want to be alive, it's going to risk these other parts. And sometimes we're not well formed to be able to have the courage, I think, that you're describing, right? To lean into that wind. And because of it, we stay inside and we don't feel it. And I think for that person that has this book against their chest, my hope is that they don't it's not to try to sanitize all the large difficulties that are going to have a seasonal effect in their life. It's not that. It's to say, no, let that wind come against you. There's an aliveness in you, And this is a part of your story. It's part of my story. It's part of our story. And we're going to weather this, but with
Mm.
hope. And that's,
Mm.
and we're going to feel both things. I think as I read these poems, that was that aliveness. I'm so excited for people to encounter these words,
Mm.
and to
Mm.
till that up again in us after this really long season of difficulty, really, to be honest.
Mm.
So, all right,
Mm.
where do you want to take us? Do you have one that
Well,
popped off?
oh, I've got several, man. I mean, if you poke me, a poem's gonna come out. So
Let's
there's
go.
there's a couple. I mean, I'd like to read the title poem maybe as we get closer to the end of our time.
I think we should
So
close with that.
let's close with that. Let's do Skookumchuck, and then if we have time, I'd also like to read the poem Crosses, if you'd like that. Is that okay?
I would love that. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so let's start with Skookumchuck. Skookumchuck is the first poem in the collection, and that word actually comes from the Chinook peoples of the area, the native peoples of the area here, and it just means big water, big water. So it's a river. It's a river poem. So here's how it goes. Skookumchuck. Broken the story, and broken the song, broken the river that bore us along, broken the cedars, and broken the shack, broken my wristwatch that cannot turn back. Burnt is the hammock, and burnt is the moss, burnt is the Christ of the arsonist's cross. Burnt are the 17 hopes of my youth. Burnt is my lying, and burnt is my truth. Full is the junkyard, and full the crapmonger. Full are the wheelchairs that wheelie no longer. Full are the organs of stupid denial. Full is each tear, and full every smile. Famous our pleasure, and famous our fear. Famous the ghosts that sing when we come near. Famous that ocean that swallows our water and makes into sacrifice every slaughter.
That's so beautiful. I remember the first time I read that, I got to the wristwatch, and it snapped me to attention, right? Like I
Mm,
was following you through that beautiful picture, and then all of a sudden I was there with that image of the wristwatch. It was absolutely beautiful.
mm, mm. And time only goes one way.
It
That's
only goes one way.
It only
Yeah.
goes one way, just like a river.
Yeah.
It only
Ah,
goes one way. Mm,
help us just imagine like your process, because again, knowing you, I have the joy of knowing a bit of who you are.
mhm,
But a river poem, right?
mm.
Like, how does this come to your imagination? Like, as you start to imagine, do you see that river, and then you start to follow that river along, and like
Mm.
how did this poem, like, let's locate it with this poem. How did this
Yeah.
poem?
Well, it comes a little bit like a dream. Like the poet, and really any artist has some sense of, you're making associations and you're making connections. You walk into the world and it's kind of a simple one for one. Time's like a river, it just goes that way. Can't go back, just goes that way. So you think, what does that mean? What does that mean for me? How am I being carried along? What's the ocean that river is taking me to? My life is being poured into this river. What's the point of it? Does the river hold my grief? Does the river hold my tears? You just start thinking and inhabiting that image. There's not a lot of conscious thought, and it's not particularly, I don't know, highfalutin or abstract. It's actually pretty simple. You think about it as you're walking, as you're sitting. And at some point, you start to write it down. And then, if you get lucky, it's something interesting enough to keep working on and crafting. And if you get unlucky, you toss it away. But for this particular poem, that image, the big water, the Skookumchuck, and thinking about, yeah, the ways that our lives just flow. And that last line, famous the ocean that swallows our water and makes into sacrifice every slaughter. There's meant to be a little bit of a turn there, right? The death isn't just the death. The death is giving us something. It's offering something to God. We may flow into the ocean, into the kind of the great mind of God, the existence of God in that way. And he holds us, he treasures us, he accepts it as sacrifice and receives it as he receives his own son. So anyway, that's a little bit of where that came from for me.
It's Thank you for giving us a glimpse of that. Again, there was moments in that poem that just struck me, but when I got to the number 17 and the flowing
Mm.
from youth to a
Mm.
maturity, right? My daughter just turned 18, and I
Mm.
was thinking just how time only goes one way,
Mm-hmm.
and it does end up in that ocean. Like
Mm.
it's just this is the power of poetry. If you're listening to this is why I say, like, get this collection. We'll have lots more conversations about other poets and poetry that can enrich
Mm.
your
Mm.
inner life, your
Mm.
home, your
Mm.
friendships, your dinner conversations. But what I love about this collection is there are these themes seasonally. And Paul, you've done such a good job of again, like the emotional life, the rational life. You have all of this depth in each of those dimensions, but the writing invites us in a really natural way to start to see and imagine things,
Mm.
and then we find ourselves in that larger story. But
Mm.
I think you invite us in a way that really allows us to kind of come into those ecosystems, like the woods, like you were describing, right?
Mm.
We
Mhm.
find ourselves in this wild, big place, but it doesn't
Mm.
start out like off-putting like that. You kind of bring us into these big themes
Mhm.
in these
Yeah.
really, really beautiful ways. So crosses, I just wrote a note when I was reading and preparing for
Mm.
today, and I was like, my note just says crosses, exclamation point, wow, underline.
Mm.
So that was it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do that. Riley is showing me our time. So I want to make
Yeah.
sure we have time
Let's
for
do that.
both of these. But would you read crosses and then
Hmm.
just, again, unpack it a bit? Because a lot of people listening, right? They're new
Yeah.
to poetry.
Hmm.
They're have a growing interest and a return to this art
Hmm.
form. And so sometimes it's intimidating because we go, well, I don't know how to understand it. I don't know how to
Mm.
to allow
Hmm.
myself into that world. And it's so helpful when somebody
Yeah.
helps us into that. So maybe just read
Well,
it and shine a little light on the poem.
well, this is one of my very favorite poems from the book, and it's one of the very simplest. Really, it was written with the cadence of a nursery rhyme and done so on purpose. I'll just read it and then I'll give a few thoughts. But if you're somebody who feels like poetry is inaccessible, I hope this changes your mind. I tell you precisely what it's about. So it's called Crosses. The carpenter's was made of wood. The mother's was her son. So it is with everyone. With everyone. What we hold dear is laid on us. Then we are laid on it. And down us run the blood and spit. The blood and spit. The lover's cross is made of love. Someone's is made of me. God's cross is made of all we see. Of all we see. Yeah, very simple. A recurring image in the collection that I hope we all can sort of live in and inhabit is that of crucifixion. And we often just think about the cross or the crucifixion of Christ, um, and rightfully so, as a historical event or a religious event. But we don't really think about the fact that Jesus worked with wood his whole life. He had an intimacy with the grains of wood, the timbers of wood with nails. He must have had love for that work, affection for that work. And then how poetic, really in a very ironic sense, how poetic that this man who worked with wood should be nailed to wood, physically nailed to wood.
Mm.
I don't know quite what that means, but I notice it. I see it. And then I think of the words to Mary, a sword shall pierce through your heart also, about the grief she would feel as a result of bringing forward the Son of God and the mission that was there. And so, in a sense, Jesus, who hung on his own cross, was Mary's cross, right? He, in a sense, was what brought pain, even though it was wonderful pain, pain to his mother. And that relationship of love and suffering, of pouring out your life, what we love is laid on us, and then we are laid on it. Christ loves the wood and he carries it, and then he is laid on it and nailed. I just see that everywhere. And particularly in situations where what we love is bringing grief to us, even if it's clean grief or holy grief or whatever, that relationship of love and suffering is just very precious and very sacred. So I might ask, just as a door for people who may not be used to poetry, who are engaging that, just think of the ways in which like what you love has been laid on you, and then how you have been laid on it. And then notice that that is Jesus's experience, and perhaps God's experience himself. That God knows, he intimately knows what it's like to love. And for that love to pierce you, for that love to um, bring complete suffering, complete loss, and yet through it, absolute and abundant life.
Mm. Mm.
So that image is just for me at the core of everything that this book is. Everything that this book is.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that, again, the power of poetry to be so precise, like to be so careful with so few words, and the
Mm,
way that it just like moves from one to the other, to the other, to the other, inviting us deeper and deeper and deeper into the truth that it's sharing and inviting us to.
mm,
That's the power of poetry. It's why we say, like, the hope for this project for us is to wondrously reveal Christianity, invite people to know God personally. And I love what you
mm,
did there of saying, and just notice that maybe this was Jesus's experience as well,
mm,
and this is God's experience. And as
mm,
you notice that, as we notice that, we know God, right?
mm,
It's not from a distance, but we can share something with this God who is so big and so ineffably, like, sometimes overwhelming to us, all of a sudden comes really, really near, because you
mm,
go, oh, wow, like laid upon him. And I feel something very similar to that in my,
mm,
so thank you for that. I mean, that's the craft of taking these enormous truths and walking us right into a gentle experience of them. It's just brilliantly done. Yeah.
mm,
Okay.
mm, mm,
See, this is why I say Malcolm Guite's not wrong. That's number
mm.
one. Number two, I get to enjoy friendship over years with you. And I think this is why, again, get the collection, because to have a poet in your home, to have the poetic voice
Mm,
in your home as a part of your spiritual formation, your joy, your pleasure. Like, there's so many ways that this will be just an enriching gift. And so,
mm,
Paul, thank you for all the work over years to
mm,
think so carefully about that through line and the visual art and every
mm,
part of this season. It's really, really beautifully done.
mm. My
As
joy.
you
I love it. Yeah.
as you come out of this experience of releasing this, did this project provoke a next question for you? Because,
Mm,
for the person who doesn't know if hope is for them, right? You spent
mm,
so much time kind of
mhm,
with all of these themes. As you kind of exited that
mm,
project and thinking
mhm.
about that, did it prompt a next question
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah, well, yeah, totally. I think it's about joy. Like, joy is really hard to write well. It's way easier to write good sad work than it is to write good joyful work. I'm not sure why that is, but it's just the case. But yeah, I think that there's going to be an invitation to embracing just this big, enormous, gritty, rough, exciting language of joy. So I'm already working on some ideas in that direction. I'm very excited to pursue that. But I think that's the invitation. The invitation is joy, praise,
Yeah.
offering back um, something. Even if you're not holding much, you're offering it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait. I love it. How can people find this collection? Like, where should they go? Where do you hope they go? Right? We have so many
Yeah,
choices as of to where to buy books and how to
you
access
bet.
these works. But as the person who brought us this gift, where would you point us to say, hey, if you can,
Yeah.
go here to find this book?
That's that's great. Well, go to wisebloodbooks.com. So Wiseblood is the publisher. They are a great contemporary publisher of all sorts of literature. You're going to find a ton of stuff that you love on that site anyway. You're going to find fiction, you're going to find nonfiction, like short monograph essays, and you're going to find some great poetry. Everything on that site is great. So just poke around, see what catches your eye, and it's going to lead you deeper into like some of the best Christian and Christian literature that's being published right now, like things that in the future, I honestly think are going to be seen as classics or seen as just like very, very respected literature. You have the chance to buy those things new right now. So just go to Wiseblood, but you can also order it through any bookseller. Um, I'm not. I doubt it's going to be easily available on Amazon, but you can order it through any independent bookseller, but or directly from wisebloodbooks.com. But I would recommend just checking out Wiseblood, going straight there,
Yeah.
and getting it that way.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think that's a great invitation. So go there, wisebloodbooks.com, because you will find this work, but also so many others. And I think that's the fun thing about finding an author that we love, finding a poet that we love, and then
Mhm.
kind of finding who the people are that are around and in that person's world. And there's something really wonderful about that. So go there, order Paul's new collection, The Locust Years, and I think that's the best way to leave this episode. Like, I never want to say goodbye, so I'll say maybe see you soon because I may be out there this summer, so maybe we'll get to hang out. But why don't we
Mm,
do this? Let me say my thank yous. We're in your
mm,
debt. This is a beautiful work, a beautiful collection. We're so excited for people to get it, and I really do think for everybody listening, I would just make this invitation. First, order the book and go, because this is one of these artists. Paul is one of these artists that is just giving us a tremendous gift, and you will love this work. The second invitation I would make is take seriously Paul's description of somebody who doesn't think hope is for them.
mm,
I think that sometimes, when somebody's going through something and there's that awkward, like, well, can I do anything? And the person looks at you and is like, no, right? Like, and everybody says, don't ask that. Just do the thing that you know to do, right? Because they're not going to
mm,
say yes. So there's
mm,
probably somebody who doesn't think hope is for them. And I
mm,
think the other thing about poetry is we can just get it for someone and leave it for them, and it will
mm,
do its work in its
mm,
time. And so
mhm,
if you are listening, grab the book, but also think about somebody in your life who maybe doesn't think hope is for them, and order a copy and send it their way. And just trust me, poetry is like this. It will find its way in the right time into the right space in their heart. So,
mm.
Paul, thank you. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Zach.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. We'll leave it with a reading from you of
Great.
the title work. How about that?
Let's do it.
All
Okay.
right.
This is the locust years. I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten. Joel 2:25. My son, there is no fairness in the years, no paid deserving, nothing but the gift gone forth, gone sideways, nothing but the pain of wandering, trying all within the locust years. And evermore the crisping, as those leaves are lost by decades, like the salmon-feathered months, whose calendars buzz promises, filling, emptying, whistling in the wind like eaten leaves. But there will come a day when highway lines point home, return you to the gravel drive cut in the hedge, the wet road filling, emptying, pulling you to me with highway lines. And I will trot to greet you, all the swarming years behind us, Run like you would when I pulled in view when we were younger, you a toddy boy, I less grizzled wild from all the rack and weeping of the locust years. Then we will pitch gold pippins in the press, crank them to cider, strain scully sweetness free of flesh and skin, the arsenic of seeds, push pulling, each of us, the handle of the press. And you will not suspect it when I rough your hair, but I will then be thinking of the day when by my last bed you will kneel and cry, and laugh and kiss me, smooth my grizzled hair. Because there is no fairness in the years, no paid deserving, but still sweetness fills the pot, as press lets forth our froth, as we both laugh and crank and crush the gift to toast our locust years.